best-selling author and researcher. Daniel Estulin is an amazing individual, and he's written the Bilderberg Club book, The True Story of the Bilderberg Group, that became the international bestseller in more than 30 countries. DanielEstulin.com, and he's got a new film out as well, or coming out. And, of course, he got even more famous when Fidel Castro invited him to Cuba to talk about his book. And it doesn't mean he's bad. If Fidel Castro invited me to go speak to him, I'd go say I disagree with communism, but I'd talk to him. It's just interesting. Daniel Estulin's obviously had a big effect, is the point. And I happen to know of two of his sources into Bilderberg. We have some of our sources that are on the edge of Bilderberg. A lot of what they say ends up in public statements, but kind of shaded. But he really has given us a lot of information over the years that 2-3 years later happens exactly as he said. Here's an example. He said they're going to implode the housing market in 2 years to consolidate power and to start a new bubble. He said that in 2006. It happened in 2008. Exactly as he said. That's because he's not looking into a crystal ball. The Bilderberg Group is at the very top of these globalist power structures. And so he joins us in hindsight to get into, from his sources, what was on the agenda this year and how things are going for them, what they think about the euro being in trouble with the EU, crisis with Greece, England wanting to have a vote to get out. They always said they couldn't survive exposure. Are they in trouble, or are they stronger than ever? Daniel Estulin of DanielEstulin.com, thank you for coming on.
Alex, it's always a pleasure to be on your show. I always feel at home and very welcome, and it's great to be with you. Yes, indeed, I was at the Bilderberg conference. I didn't make it too close to the actual events. We actually stayed in Innsbruck. Our sources on the inside, the same sources which sent us the original document from October 2014, telling us about the actual site of the meeting in June of this year. They warned us a couple of weeks ago, saying that they're on the lookout for you if you actually get there. They'll do everything in their power to make sure you go. So we stayed in Innsbruck, and our people, cameraman incognito, actually went over. They didn't tell anybody they're part of our group, and that's the information the last little bit we're going to be putting into a documentary. But that said, we certainly have a lot of information from this year's meeting. As you know, our sources, they're always there. They never fail with the information, and it's been a very interesting slog, I have to say that. And I've been also following what your guys have been saying, and a lot of great information. So I'm very, very grateful to be back on your show.
Well, thank you. Well, you've got some of the best sources out there, quite frankly, inside Bilderberg. We just have them on the edge of Bilderberg. How are things going for them? What's the mood? What was the theme? And what are they going to be pushing?
Well, you know, I think they're very concerned. You have to say, if you're looking at the agenda this year, and also if you're looking at the actual list of the attendees, it was, pound for pound, I'd say, it was certainly one of the stronger pound for pound lists over the last 10 years or so. There were lots of, presidents and prime ministers from, northern European countries, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, that kind of stuff. And also some notable missing individuals, as was the case with Christine Lagarde, the president of the International Monetary Fund. She wasn't there, which only goes to show you and basically tells me from what we're getting is that there's going to be some changes at the International Monetary Fund on the one hand, and also the fact is that the United States, which is basically, the principal, purveyor of the International Monetary Fund's power in the world, is also losing some of its grip at the expense of some of these other groups, such as, BRICS, the new Asian Investment Bank, and so on and so forth. There's going to be, obviously there's going to be some movement over the next little while, and that's one of the reasons why Lagarde wasn't there. I don't know if she's going to be able, to remain in her position, or they're going to, get rid of her and put someone else in their place. But certainly that, tells me a lot about the fact that, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, European Central Bank, Federal Reserve, these are, 100% attendees at every Bilderberg meeting. And the fact is that the International Monetary Fund's president is not there. It's the first in a very, very long time.
What about the unprecedented security? I mean, I know that Tucker got shot at. You've had them try to kill you. We're not being dramatic. There's a reason you stay back. They really are scared of you because they know you've got some sources inside. They absolutely hate your guts. They raided Charlie Skelton. Our guys were threatened some. I've had my family death threatened when I covered Bilderberg. When Hillary Clinton and Obama were there, they were actually listening to our phones and then calling up my wife, calling up family, and making threats and saying, we just listened to you, and repeating it back to freak them out. That tended to be a particularly important one in 2008, you noted. This one seemed, just from me watching afar with our reporters, to be ultra important. I've never seen them put a cordon back 6 miles, Daniel.
Oh, that's absolutely right. One of the reasons they started doing this back in 2007, the last year, where you had, fairly easy access or close enough you actually, get them with a nice big long lens, was in 2006 when you came to Canada on the outskirts of Ottawa. Before that, Jim and I were basically the only people going to these meetings. And when my book came out in the United States, and, everybody had a chance to see these photographs, which looked like it were taken, literally from 2 meters away. Of course, they weren't, but it looked like it. These people realized that they need to do something with the security, and then with the onslaught of online media and social media, it just became impossible for these people to keep this information under the lid. So they started pushing this thing further and further back. And this year, you're absolutely right. They certainly got a little bit out of hand in this sense. But also, what really surprised me, especially when I saw back in October 2014, the document where the Interior Ministry basically telling all their people the vacation period for the month of June is off the charts because the Bilderbergers are coming to town. What surprised me is the fact that these people are actually having their meeting in June, because usually it's it could be late April at the earliest, and usually sometime in May 15, 20. That's just about the time when you actually look at the agendas of the last 10, 20, 30 years. That's just about the right time for them to have the meeting. And the fact is that back in October they knew that this year's meeting is going to be held in June. Told me that a lot of very important things are going to be happening in June, because obviously if they hold their meeting in May and then stuff happens in June, it certainly doesn't make any sense. And the first thing that obviously happened, you had a G7 meeting just literally hours or days before the Bilderberg conference. But then when you look at the other stuff, and there's some of the things that they talked about, and some of the things that we've got from our sources, who basically said the reasons are the following. There's an Austrian mortgage bank with a very funny name by the name of Hypo Alpe Adria. Yeah, try saying that 10 times, okay? And they have to make a smallish payment of 500 million euros, as a result of what basically happened when the Swiss depegged the franc and, revalued their currency like, 30% in 10 minutes. And so that's one of the things that happened. The southern province of Carinthia, backed away from, pledges previously made by saying that we simply can't pay what the monies that we owe. And, an important understanding is how all of these banks basically own each other's debt. In other words, the cross-ownership, quote-unquote, of debt means that when one goes down, it will, basically provoke a chain reaction of all the other banks going down. And while this isn't, a huge trigger, this Hypo Alpe Adria, it's a little bank. The fact is that all of Eastern Europe can and will be affected. And, but what originally was from, the Swiss depegging the franc from the euro, and, with a system as illiquid as it is today, there's no telling how far, this thing could reverberate. And, of course, you have Greece, which just recently missed on June the 5th, the deadline, for the payment, which was 320 billion euros, the money they simply don't have, and they said, we're not going to print it, and we can't, we're not going to pay it, and we certainly can't print it. And so the only thing left is for them to default and fall into the open arms of Russia and China. And, yesterday, the day before, right after the Bilderberg meeting finished, all of the European newspapers in Italy, in France, in Germany, in Spain, they all basically said the same thing. If Greece gets out of the euro and defaults on its debt, there's going to be a meeting in Brussels where jointly they're going to decide to close the banks and give us all a haircut. Anybody who owes more than 100,000 euros is going to be having to pay 10% of that money towards the bail-in, and anything under is going to be 6.75%, which isn't new. It all comes back from 2011 and the whole Cyprus fiasco. But it just goes to tell you and to show you how a lot of this stuff is actually playing itself out. You can, talk about Ukraine, International Monetary Fund thing to, restructure $10 billion worth of,
it's fascinating.
Debt, and that kind of stuff. Not to mention something else, which was very, very interesting. And again,
well hold on, Daniel. We've got to go to break. When we come back, I want to get into that next point you were about to hit, and I want to ask you this other question. You mentioned the banks and the corruption of who was there. HSBC, with all these admissions of fixing rates and laundering money. You had the heads of HSBC, 3 of them there, top people with the regulators from the EU and the exchequer head, which regulates it in the UK. I mean, that right there is so illegal, so flagrant. They seem to be so bold. We'll talk about that with Daniel Estulin straight ahead. Greeks refuse to pay debt, declare it illegal, illegitimate, and, quote, odious. Other nations set to follow suit. That's some of the news up on Infowars.com. Customer claims KFC served him fried rat. Well, that's going to be healthier than the chicken soaked in MSG. So you ought to be happy. Privacy expert, time-traveling robots could punish future crime. Daniel, how is their agenda going, of course? And when you got cut off from the break, you were trying to get into something you were saying that was really, really important. Go ahead.
It's a very interesting point when you kind of look at this stuff, from bird's eye view, and you see how these things kind of work together. For example, very, very, just a few days before the Bilderberg conference, Russian government via Russian newspaper Pravda announced Chinese gold holdings of 30,000 tons. Now, if you kind of think about it, you say, what the hell? That doesn't make any sense. Why would a Russian newspaper, obviously working together with the Russian government, announce something, as far as Chinese gold holdings, unless the Chinese and the Russians were working together using Russian newspaper Pravda to get the information out and actually pressure the Bilderberger some way, because again, the timing is interesting. And to rehash this, Pravda, they've released this article. They wouldn't do this without Moscow's permission. And so would Moscow have given them permission without the approval from Beijing when these two are working together? Obviously not. And what does that have to do with, Kerry Obama? Kerry meeting Putin not long ago in Sochi, because that's an about face, about the current policy of the United States. And so when you kind of look at this whole thing, gold is a financial thermonuclear weapon. I mean, you've been talking about gold deposits for a very, very long time. And this is the kind of stuff that can actually destroy the fiat currency system of the West. And, it wouldn't surprise, I think, anyone who really understands how things work, if Washington was giving the courtesy, so to speak, of a heads up, to some sort of coming announcement, even if a smaller sum than,
Sure.
30,000 tons, which is a hell of a lot of, tons of gold. And so when you kind of look at this, and, this announcement by China, it raises the questions of Western holdings, which, of course, brings Western currencies into question.
Sure, well, we've seen them manipulating that with tungsten and naked shorting. What does it signify in Spain that they're talking about restricting sales of gold? I mean, that's got to show you that they're really worried about gold.
Well, it basically tells you that the whole thing is done. If you look at what's actually going on in Europe over the last few days, France, Germany, Austria, Italy, they have closed down their borders, Alex. This whole Schengen Treaty in Europe, which basically created this one united borderless Europe, that's dead. You have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of immigrants coming into Italy, tens of thousands that are coming into France. You have 50, 60,000 over the last few months have entered Germany. And so the European nations are saying we've had enough. And it's the European Central Authority, which is European Parliament and European Union, they have completely lost control and are losing power. And this is one of the reasons why we're seeing some of these, shake-ups on the European supranational level. And that goes to show you that, if France shut down the border, coming back from Innsbruck, we had to go through France. And when I actually got to France, that's all part of the European Union. For the first time in, I think, like 10 years, I had to show my passport. Usually I just show my residency permit from Spain, and that's enough. Well, they asked me, and they insisted on the passport, and I didn't have a passport. They wouldn't let me into the country. Do you know what I mean? So this is the first time.
So their borders are going back up, which signifies the euro is beginning to break up, which I know the globalists plan to build it, then suck everybody dry, then implode it, but have it fold into a new supranational global government as the bubble. Is it going according to plan, or is it gyrating out of control? Is globalism in trouble?
Globalism is in trouble because, for the first time, and I know we've talked about this last year and the year before, to what point are these people controlling, the financial meltdown? Well, I can tell you this, they're controlling it, but they're not controlling it as they would have, liked to have controlled it, because one of the strong sentiments amongst the Bilderbergers this year is that the United States dollar may not survive, and so what they're simply doing is they're cashing out, and you see this cashing out process on the world stage. And, as the year winds down over the last, 6 months of the year. It's going to be a very messy, very chaotic, and very important period in the demise of the current economic situation that we're living through. And if you kind of go back over the past 40, 50 years or so, every 7 years there's some kind of a thing going on which makes you wonder what's going on in the world. In 1973, Arab oil embargo. 1980s, you remember gold and silver Hunt Brothers peak? Then in 87, you had the Black Monday. 94, you had the famous irrational exuberance with the ensuing Asian meltdown. The 2001, you had the inside 9/11 job. 2008, the Lehman Brothers failures, followed by the...
We're set for another one.
Exactly, and the year 2015 will be known for the United States dollar.
I'll tell you what, Daniel, do 5 more minutes with us. You got to finish with this bombshell info. We've had rabbis on talking about the 7-year Shemitah. We've had former head of policy, Department of the Treasury, talking about cycles. We've had Mr. Dent on. We've had just countless economist experts on, all saying that a massive, massive meltdown is coming, much bigger than 2008. And now it's in the news today. The next great European financial crisis has begun. Business Insider, Greeks are stashing tens of thousands of bundles of euros in their homes ahead of a bank bail-in when they grab your bank account. UK draws up contingency plans as Bank of Greece warns of uncontrollable crisis. I mean, this is big. London Guardian, it's going to be bad. Whatever happens, Greece on the edge of Eurozone exit looms. And then you've got the banks all admitting that they're fixing the interest rates, money laundering, manipulating currencies, manipulating stock markets. I was talking to a very successful hedge fund manager who got bought out a few years ago, but it was a major company, billions of dollars, off record. Ran into him and then looked up who he was, and sure enough, he was who he said he was. A pretty famous guy. I knew I'd seen him on TV and stuff. And we were in a restaurant. He came over and talked to me about 10 minutes. Tried to buy me a drink and stuff. And I'm detoxing, so I was none of that. And he was just scared. And I told you about billionaires 5 years ago that I talked to who were leaving to New Zealand. I told you James Cameron really left because he's scared. Now that's admitted. I mean, I didn't just say that. I knew somebody that knows him well. And Daniel Estulin's on with us. I know he's for real. I know his sources. And he's saying it's the 7-year cycle. Is it artificial? Is it there? Get to where you say this is going, because all the experts, we have the experts on that are right. That's what we have you on. We appreciate you coming on. DanielEstulin.com, best-selling author, joins us, researcher, Bilderberg investigative journalist. But it seems like this new bubble is so much bigger than the others. Am I right in saying this could be spectacular? And how bad could it be? I know you got to go, Daniel, so 5 minutes. What else do you want to impart to folks?
Well, it could be spectacular in the sense that you have gold right now at $1,200 or $1,300 an ounce. Well, it could very well go to about $50,000 or $60,000 an ounce very shortly. And it's not me saying it. Bloomberg came out and said that, shortly just, before the Bilderberg conference. So I know this was on the agenda. And when we're talking about, the dollar collapsing, and Bilderberg is understand this, and they're cashing out. Or with Bilderberg, or Bloomberg, which is Bilderberg and mainstream, they're talking about this thing actually going to $50,000, $60,000 an ounce. My guess is that Bloomberg has some type of information that China is going to announce their holdings in gold, which means that they have 10,000 tons or 20 or 30, as what Russian Pravda said. So what does that mean to the United States? Well, basically it means that after the announcement is made, all the gold holdings, people are going to say, hey, wait a minute, where did these people get the gold from? Well, the obvious answer is from Western vaults, and the biggest Western vault is the United States. So the marketplace will make a judgment between the yuan, the Chinese currency, and the dollar. And, so does that mean that Americans are going to, voluntarily audit their, gold holdings? Obviously not, but the market is going to make them, because basically the marketplace will say, you do an audit or we'll keep selling the dollars. And so basically we could very much be looking at this massive implosion over the next few months. And the Russians and the Chinese, they haven't pulled the trigger to this point in all this, in-your-face provocation by the West and the United States, because they weren't quite set up, but they are set up now. And I think we'll be seeing, as you said, September. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing, too, from a lot of people. So if September comes, start building your Noah Ark now. You still have a little bit of time left.
Well, I tell you, Daniel Estulin, you look at the provocative moves against Russia. China's engaged in some of their own provocative moves, but the West has as well. I'd say that's 50-50 blame. But I look at the Western establishment. Our elites have never acted this reckless. I've never been to Russia. I don't have a dog in the fight. But I don't want to start fights with people. And I can't see geopolitically how destabilizing Poland, Ukraine, and the Caucasus helps the Euro, the West, anybody. I mean, we are truly, our elites in our name are cut and dry bad guys. There's really no way to change that. Russia is now allied with Egypt, allied with Greece, allied. China was bigger enemies with them than us. They're now buddy-buddy. The globalists have taken America's soft power and you-know-whatted it away, down the toilet. Our elites are super smart, as you know. There's got to be some larger plan. Why would they be destroying our name, risking World War III, and acting so crazy? Or is it megalomania like Napoleon and Hitler got? Do they really think they're invincible? Do they have an ace in the hole or a bevy of aces, a stable of aces, an arsenal of aces that we don't know about?
I don't think so. I think the question is, it's the British Empire. And what basically happens is that they're going down. The economic cycle is going down. You know, the system itself is putrid, and that's about to be, you know, blown out. And so they're willing to destroy the entire world in order to save themselves. Of course, they're also going to go down. There are a lot of unknowns right now. And the only thing we do know is that if this thing gets started anywhere in the world, it's going to get really, really bad. And you're talking about nuclear nations, not just the United States, you know, projecting its weakness here or there against a weaker opponent, be it Iraq or Afghanistan or, you know, Grenada. No, we're talking about China, we're talking about Russia, we're talking about India, Pakistan, North Korea. And if you get into these shooting wars with these kinds of things, the odds are it's going to go nuclear. And if it's going nuclear, we all go into hell.
Well, Mark Dice did a video where 80% of the people, 8 out of 10 people, said, let's nuke Russia so we're superior. They went and talked to Russians, did the same thing. They all freaked out and said, what are you, crazy? And almost attacked the cameramen, because that's a sane response to insanity. And I'm not glorifying the Russians, but what happened to Americans, especially so-called liberals, that they're in this trance because they think the word liberal lets them act like fascist? What happened to the Republican Party trying to sign the TPP? I mean, there really is a collective insanity in the West right now.
You know, basically, Alex, like, you know, in the United States, the top two areas where the government is spending most of its money, the first is obvious, it's military. But you know what the second is? Fighting the discontent of the public. And that's how much, you know, how much the elite are afraid of people's discontent. They're actually spending, you know, gazillions of dollars.
That's tens of billions a month.
Number two, after military spending, on making sure that people stay in line on every level of society. Because what used to happen in the 1960s and the early 1970s, the protests and so on and so forth, that is no longer the case. You have an occasional thing here or there, but a generalized thing, because this is a country of 330 million people, and, you know, there's a lot of simmering, you know, government protest on every level.
Sure, but they're using high-tech brainwashing to pacify the public.
They're using every way possible to pacify the public, you know. There's a lot of games being played, and if you kind of look at what's going on in America itself, there's a lot of not only race wars, but there's a lot of fighting between, you know, groups of people and races, blacks and whites, men against women. You know, you have, Indians against the Pakistanis. You know, you have the Arabs against the blacks, and all of this kind of stuff. You know, the police against, you know, everybody else. All this kind of stuff is, I have no doubt at all, is orchestrated from behind the scenes, because while you're fighting each other, you don't keep your eye on the bigger prize, which is, you know, survival of the planet itself at the cost of these super.
Sure. So bottom line, the world government is being built. The Pope's out there endorsing it, but at the cost of the planet itself. I mean, they may get world government for about a minute and then blow it up.
It certainly doesn't look good. It's a very, very, very scary situation, especially as you don't have, you know, the politicians that we had in the world in the 60s and the 50s. Well, actually, even the Bilderbergers who built Bilderberg, you know, in 1954 and the early 1960s, the people who came out of the, you know, late 19th century or 20th century, they're not there anymore. Now you have the people who are running the show. You have, you know, the crazy kooks who were born after the Second World War, you know, the baby boomers, and they certainly don't have the gravitas of, you know, the Rockefellers and the Jacksons and the Prince Bernards and and these individuals who actually put Bilderberg on the map. And so that's why we have the situation that we're in, because the older generation, the Kissingers who are 90, the Rockefellers who just turned 100, the Brzezinskis, the Schultzes, these people are old or dead or dying, and so they're completely out of the picture, or they're just about to be out of the picture. And everybody else who basically runs the show right now certainly doesn't have this long, the distant tunnel vision that these others had way back when.
Well, sure. That was my final question. DanielEstulin.com. I can't wait to get you on. Your new film, 4 or 5 years in the making, comes out. I've seen some of the cinematography, the trailer, truly amazing. David Rockefeller did just turn 100 on June 12th. I didn't even know that. It just seems like yesterday he was 94 and put out memoirs. I'm told David Rockefeller has faded. That's why Senator Rockefeller retired to take over the reins. For those that don't know, David Rockefeller has been there since his father set up the UN and the entire global government infrastructure. I mean, is anybody in modern world history more important than David Rockefeller? And what's the word on him?
Well, he's completely out of the picture. He's 100, so it's. I don't think he's altogether intellectually. He can be altogether. Certainly, Gaga is. I don't think he'll be going to any public meetings. I don't think we'll be seeing very much of him, because at this kind of this advanced stage, even if we just put his 6th heart transplant in, but it doesn't make any difference. When you're 100, you're 100. Nature doesn't give time out, and he's out of the picture. But again, him being out of the picture only means that there's nobody else taking over the reins, so to speak, of organizations such as Bilderberg, and also the fact that there's no new blood. There's the people who are there. They all come from the same walks of life. They all talk to each other the same kind of language. And as Bilderberg,
they're in a bubble. They're in a bubble. They're in a bubble. They're smoking their own dope.
Exactly, Alex. They're in a bubble, and that means that there is going to come the time, not too long from now, if we're still around, that Bilderberg is going to be completely, irrelevant, simply because the people who are there, they simply don't understand how the world works beyond, the 4 walls that they operate within.
Amazing. Well, I can't. When is your film coming out? I mean, I've seen clips of it.
The film is done. Yeah, we just needed to put this last little bit of the Bilderberg meeting itself into the film, and it's finished. And we're going to be premiering in the United States in September.
Well, I want to get you on then. Anytime you want to come on, we'd love to have you. Thank you, Daniel Estulin. Amazing information.
Thank you. Sure.
That is thank you, sir. That's a true investigative journalist right there, the highest caliber.